Yes, the festive season is upon us, so this year I want to show you how to bake one of these bad boys. Hey, where's my loaf gone? It must have been stolen. So yes, Stollen, a very traditional festive bread from Germany, is gaining popularity over here, but I think a lot of people are put off by the marzipan in it. It's one of those flavours you either love or you hate. But hopefully I can get a few more of you marzipan skeptics on board with this recipe, because we're not going to be omitting the marzipan, but we're going to be replacing it with a homemade almond paste, which is just much more mild and delicate in flavour and hasn't got that kind of synthetic almond flavour that you tend to find in shop-bought marzipan. So, for the recipe you're going to need 300 grams of strong white bread flour, 10 grams of instant yeast, 5 grams of fine sea salt, 30 grams of caster sugar, 2 large eggs, and then for your fruit I've got 100 grams of sultanas. You could use raisins, whichever you prefer, and 25 grams of mixed candied peel. Now I've soaked them overnight in a bowl with 60 grams of spiced rum. It's Christmas. You could use brandy, that's kind of traditional, but let's face it, at Christmas everything is brandy, so it makes a change to use the rum, and the spices work really well. Speaking of spice, you're going to need nutmeg. That's the big flavour in this. So either half a whole nutmeg or a quarter of a teaspoon of ground nutmeg. And then I'm also going to be using quarter of a teaspoon of mixed spice. Again, you could use cinnamon, but come on, it's Christmas, cinnamon is everywhere. So we'll just ring the changes by using some mixed spice. And then you'll also need 100 grams of unsalted butter, which I've melted in a pan and then added 100 grams of whole milk to it to give me a kind of warm buttery milk mixture. That's going to make our dough. Then for your almond paste you're going to need 80 grams of ground almonds, 30 grams of caster sugar, 30 grams of icing sugar or powdered sugar for my American friends, and then a little pinch of fine sea salt. So the first thing we're going to do is make that paste. So into our KitchenAid, fitted with the leaf beater, the paddle beater, we need the almonds, the 30 grams of sugar, 30 grams of icing sugar, little pinch of salt, and then you just want the egg white from your egg, but reserve the yolk because we're going to use that in the dough. So easiest way, break it into a bowl, lift up the yolk like that, pour in the white, put the yolk back in for later, onto the mixer, and then beat that for about 30 seconds. You just want it to come together into a paste. Don't overwork it though, otherwise the oils from the almonds start coming out and it all gets very greasy. So switch that on. Okay, let's come together into a paste. Just use the spatula to scrape anything off of the beater, like so. Then you're going to need a sheet of cling film, like that. Just lay it out on your worktop. Let's move a bit of this out the way. And then just get the paste into the base of the bowl. Try and bring it into a bit of a cylinder. There we go. Pop that onto the cling film, like so. And then it's probably easier just to use your hands to kind of squidge it out into some form of sausage, and then put the cling film over it, and then you can use your hand just to squeeze it into a nice neat cylinder like that. You can see, just push it along. You want it to be about 25 centimeters in length, then roll it up. There we go, twist the ends, and now pop that in the fridge to firm up whilst you make the dough. So back in the bowl, we don't need to clean it out. we need to add our flour, the yeast, salt, sugar, the egg yolk that we reserved from the paste, the whole egg, in that goes, and then the butter and milk mixture, like that. Now swap the paddle beater for the dough hook, and now we want to mix that for about 7 minutes. Normally I mix bread for about 5 minutes, but with all the fat in there from the butter and the egg yolks, that's going to inhibit gluten formation, so mix it for about 7 minutes. There we go, that's come together nicely. Just scrape that off the dough hook. Now to that we want to add our spices, because actually I forgot to put them in at the beginning. You can do it whenever. So half a nutmeg grated in, lovely. And then our little sprinkling of mixed spice, like I say, probably about 1/4 teaspoon. And then we want to get our soaked fruit in there, but we don't want to add all the extra liquid, but don't throw it away because we'll be using that later. So just scrape out the fruit, reserving any rum that's left in the bowl. There we go. So now you've got that nice rummy, syrupy liquid left. And now back onto the mixer, and as always mix that for about 30 seconds, just so you don't smash up the sultanas, but you do want to get them incorporated into the dough. There we go, once again that has come together. So scrape it off the dough hook, and now actually what I'm going to do is tip it out and just sort of knead it into a ball before we leave it to proof. So a little bit of flour on the worktop, scrape that dough out, and that's just going to really make sure that those sultanas are all incorporated into it, and it's kind of shaping the dough into a uniform ball. So just fold it around like that into a ball. There we go, those last 2 sultanas, stick them in there like so. Now that goes back in the bowl like that. Cover it with the cling film so it doesn't dry out, and now you want to leave that to proof at room temperature for somewhere between 2 to 3 hours. It's going to be slow to rise, like I say, because of the fats in there, so you want it to almost double in size, but like I say, it's not going to be 45 minutes to an hour as it would with normal dough, so 2 to 3 hours. Alright then, I've left that for 3 hours, and as we can see, the dough's puffed up nicely. If yours hasn't grown much, then leave it for another hour. 3 to 4 hours will be absolutely fine. So let's tip this out onto a floured worktop, and then we can go about shaping it. So scrape it out of the bowl like so, and now a little dusting of flour on top. And we want to get this into an oval shape that's about as long as our almond paste. So I'm just going to use a rolling pin, put a little bit more flour on because I really don't want it to stick, just to gently, don't squeeze all the air out of it, just gently roll it. You could probably stretch it by hand, absolutely no problem. You don't want to make it too thin, otherwise you're going to get a very flat loaf. Now unroll the almond paste, which has firmed up nicely in the fridge. Place that in the middle. Then all you want to do is just tuck those 2 ends over to kind of seal it in, and then we're going to fold like a letter 1/3 over like that, and then the other side over like that. Now you can leave it that way up and bake it like a traditional Stollen, so you get that kind of ear on top. But what I find is it kind of opens up in the oven and you end up with a flatter loaf. I prefer a kind of bigger slice, so what I'm going to do is put that seam underneath, put it onto my baking tray like that, and then it's going to puff up into more of a round loaf, a little bit like a kind of swollen ciabatta. So that's the look I'm going for. But anyway, you can cover that back up with your cling film, and now you want to leave that to proof at room temperature for another 1 to 2 hours. Okay, I've let that proof for the full 2 hours. As we can see, it's puffed up nicely, soft to the touch. I'm not a big fan of the finger poke test with normal bread, but actually for this recipe it works quite well. If you push your finger into it and it springs back slowly, that means it's ready to bake. If it springs back really fast, that means it's still underproofed, so leave it for a little longer. If the dent just stays there and it doesn't come back, that means you've overproofed it and there's not a huge amount you can do at this stage. However, Stollen is a pretty forgiving dough, so still bake it, it'll be absolutely fine. You may just not get that nice oven spring, it'll be a slightly flatter loaf, but not a problem. So I've got my oven preheated to 160 degrees Celsius, that's 320 Fahrenheit. I'm going to bake this for 30 minutes. As always, I've got a roasting tray in the bottom of the oven preheated, so when I put the loaf in, I can add a glass of water to the roasting tray below it, and that's going to generate steam in the oven, again ensuring that we get that good oven spring. I will check it after 20 minutes, give the tray a turn so it browns evenly, and if at that point I notice it is getting quite dark, I would turn the oven down by 10 or 20 degrees before baking it for that final 10 minutes. So 30 minutes in total. Don't overbake it. You don't want your Stollen to be dry on the inside. So I'm going to get this in the oven and then I will show you what to do once it's baked. Okay, and there we have it. I got it out of the oven and I've let it cool for about 5 minutes. Looking good. Now is the perfect opportunity just to pluck off any burnt fruit from the outside. Any sultanas or candied peel that get stuck on the outside tend to crisp up a bit and go a bit bitter. So take them off. Now it looks lovely, but it doesn't look like a Stollen, but we're about to rectify that. So in a pan I have melted a knob of butter, about 20 grams, and now to that I'm going to add that reserved rum syrup that we've got left over from the soaked fruit. And now you just want to brush that all over your loaf whilst it's warm, and that is just going to soak in, soften it up, give it a nice flavour, and also it's going to make the icing sugar stick to it, which is going to give us that nice snowy coating that Stollen is famous for. So be generous, get that buttery, rummy syrup all over it. There we go. And now the fun bit, it's snow jacket. So lots of icing sugar and a sieve. Pour it in, and we're just going to let that, I probably haven't even got enough icing sugar in here, but basically just keep sprinkling it over it. The first layer that hits it's going to absorb that syrup, so it's going to make a kind of icing or a glaze, but then the more you add, eventually it will turn white and look like that classic Stollen. There we go. Beautiful. There we go. So now I'm going to leave that to finish cooling, maybe another half hour to an hour, and then we will cut into it and have a little festive taste up. Okay, I've let that cool for another half an hour. It's still a little bit warm, but I do want to cut into it so I can show you inside. I've transferred it to a nice wooden platter, so that looks pretty good. You're going to be proud dishing that up to the family. So let's cut into it and have a little look. So we'll go through here. Look at that, lovely. I'm just going to take a slice here and then I will show you how I like to eat it. So I've got a plate, pop it on there, and now if you get a knife you can scoop that almond paste that's baked inside the Stollen and use it like an almond butter just to spread over the whole thing. Then you're not just getting bread, 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 big lump of marzipan bread, bread, bread. You get it everywhere. So I'm going to take a big old bite and then you'll just have to listen to me chewing for a second. I'll cut the video for a sec.
A few moments later.
It's absolutely delicious. Taste of Christmas in a mouthful. I'm not actually a huge fan of Christmas cake, so for me this works just as well. I'm getting all the icing, the marzipan, the fruit, the alcohol. It's ticking all those boxes, but it's just not that sort of heavy, dense fruit cake. And the bonus for this is you can eat this at breakfast. I mean, you could eat Christmas cake at breakfast, but this is probably more acceptable. And the little bonus is if you slice this and toast it, then scoop out that almond paste and spread it on top, you'll have found it's caramelized slightly in the toaster and it tastes even better. So win-win. I hope you give this one a go and I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, give it a thumbs up, leave your comments and questions below. And until next time, very Merry Christmas and enjoy your festive baking.